Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the tipping point, America's entry into World War I. We're going to break down the exact triggers and the sheer historical irony that dragged a highly reluctant United States off the sidelines and straight into the meat grinder of the Great War.
So you might be wondering, why didn't America get involved immediately? I mean, when war broke out in 1914, the U.S. essentially just watched the world burn from across the Atlantic. For years, from 1914 right up to April of 1917, the primary game plan was just to stand back. And the reason? Well, American politicians were absolutely petrified of being drawn into a foreign war. To them, this was a distinctly European problem, and they had this giant 3,000-mile moat called the Atlantic Ocean to keep them safe. Committing American lives to fight for foreign borders was a massive political risk that literally nobody in Washington wanted to take.
Which brings us to walking the neutrality tightrope. To manage that massive political risk, the Wilson administration had to attempt this nearly impossible balancing act.
To really get why they hesitated, you have to look at who actually made up the country at the time. The United States was, and is, fundamentally a nation of immigrants. Millions of people had literally just crossed an ocean specifically to leave European conflicts, poverty, and conscription in the rearview mirror. So the very idea of turning around and sending their sons right back to die on the exact same blood-soaked continent they had just fled, it was completely unthinkable. The American public genuinely, 100%, wanted absolutely no part of this war.
But here's where it gets interesting. Take a look at this massive disconnect between our public face and our private actions. Official policy was strict neutrality and no involvement, but our actual actions? Heavy sympathy, financial aid, and actively helping the Allies. You see, official neutrality never actually meant indifference. Behind closed doors, the U.S. was secretly funneling aid and definitely playing favorites. The country was heavily sympathetic to the Allies, and we were helping them out in ways that the Germans, quite rightly, saw as highly destructive to their own goals.
And this whole political tightrope act reached its absolute peak during the 1916 presidential election. Woodrow Wilson actually won his campaign on the slogan, "He kept us out of war." He literally promised the American people he'd maintain that fragile neutrality. Yet the incredible, honestly, the biting irony of this whole moment is that within just a year of winning an election on a peace platform, that very same president would be standing before Congress, formally declaring war on Germany.
So what forced America's hand? How do you go from "he kept us out of war" to full-scale military mobilization? Well, it certainly wasn't an accident.
That precious neutrality was finally shattered by two massive German blunders that totally forced the president's hand. Step 1. Germany revives unrestricted submarine warfare. This meant they were going to just indiscriminately sink ships, including American civilian and merchant vessels, without any warning whatsoever. And then Step 2. As if that aggressively lethal naval strategy wasn't enough, the Germans somehow managed, in a really clumsy, ham-fisted way, to orchestrate a secret alliance right in America's backyard. Enter the infamous Zimmermann telegram.
In an absolute masterclass of a miscalculation, Germany secretly tried to recruit Mexico to join their side in the event that America entered the war, and their proposed reward for Mexico attacking the United States, Germany literally promised to hand back Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. It was an audacious, deeply threatening proposal designed specifically to keep the American military bogged down on its own continent.
But think about it. How exactly did the United States uncover this highly classified plot to carve up their own country? I mean, the Germans obviously weren't broadcasting this over the radio. Well, the way this plot was exposed is, hands down, one of the most fascinating intelligence blunders of the early 20th century.
Astonishingly, to send this top-secret geopolitical plot to dismember the United States, the Germans used a Western Union office. Yes, a commercial telegraph service. And the fatal flaw in this supposed master plan? That specific telegraph office routing the message was physically located in London. So the British easily intercepted the telegram, promptly sent it straight over to the US government, and it was released to the public. The American outrage was, as you can imagine, absolutely immense. Combined with the unrestricted submarine warfare, Wilson felt he had absolutely no choice but to take the US into the war.
This intense public anger pushed America directly into the conflict, which abruptly turned a brutal, grinding European stalemate into a desperate race against time. Entering the war changed the dynamic, but it definitely didn't guarantee a swift end right away. Actually, the timing created one of the most stressful military logistical challenges in modern history. It literally became a pure numbers game, and the clock was ticking loud.
Because look at how this timeline lines up. It created absolute panic for the Allies. From 1914 to 1917, America watches neutrally. Then, in April 1917, America officially enters. But also in 1917, Russia drops out of the war. Literally, right as the U.S. is stepping into the fray, Russia is leaving the Eastern Front due to their own internal revolution. That meant Germany could take all of its Eastern forces and throw them straight at the West. Suddenly, the desperate question was, could the United States get enough troops across the Atlantic fast enough to actually tilt the scale?
The Allies were in dire straits. Just imagine the sheer exhaustion of the French and British forces at this point. You've got 4 years of mud, disease, and horrific trench warfare. There was a very real, heavy fear that outright defeat was rapidly approaching, so the American arrival was crucial. This sudden influx of fresh American men, material, and vast resources provided a desperately needed boost. It was a real shot in the arm that completely revitalized both the exhausted political leaders and the battle-weary soldiers on the ground.
This rapid, massive deployment of American resources ultimately did tilt the scale just in time. The men and materials flooded the Western Front, pushed back the German advances, and helped bring about the end of this devastating conflict. But in doing so, it brought about an entirely new global dynamic. By stepping out of isolationism and directly deciding the fate of a European war, America fundamentally altered its own DNA on the world stage.
The true legacy of this decision was a total transformation. Before World War I, America was seen as a wealthy, young, and growing nation, but one mostly confined to its own hemisphere. Post-World War I, it was undeniably a true world power. By providing that essential, vital push to end the bloody stalemate, the United States fundamentally shifted its identity, establishing a dominant global posture that would define the rest of the 20th century.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this profound thought to ponder. How different would the 20th century look if America had maintained its neutrality? What if the dominoes had just fallen a little differently? If Germany hadn't resumed sinking neutral ships, or if that one single telegraph office hadn't been geographically located in London to intercept that absurdly clumsy Zimmerman telegram, America might have successfully stayed out of it. And if that had happened, would the United States have ever stepped onto the global stage to become the economic and military superpower we recognize today? It is absolutely incredible to think how a few intercepted words over a wire forever changed the trajectory of the modern world.